You pressed play on this podcast with the click of curiosity. It is another dimension, a dimension of mind, a dimension where nothing is sacred and everything is explainable. You're streaming into a land of both inside and outside, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Midside.
Welcome to the Midside, where we don't try to expose cover-ups. It's just not that hard to these days. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers is doing it. We'll get to that in a second, though. I'm your host, Justin M. Wisniewski, the hopeful romantic, and I retroactively and proactively denounce anything anyone has ever said and ever will say on this show. To begin, I'd like to apologize for the audio quality of last episode. I had to release a different audio file than usual. Usually I mix together our two different individual audio recordings, plus the third track is the drops. However, I was having hardware issues. The cord going from my microphone to my headphones was creating interference. Weeks ago, it started as just mild static, then it became major static, then it became intermittent static, and last episode I think it just went out completely because at a certain point my audio recording was completely static. So it was fine for most of the recording, then like 10 minutes of it was completely static, and then it was fine again at the end. It's very interesting that a cord that is seemingly just an output cord would somehow affect the basic functioning of the mic, but that's how technology works, I suppose. But the audio should be good now. I paid for a $5 a cord on Amazon, and everything seems to be good. So hopefully everything will be great now. And it's interesting that, everyone's complaining about cost of living, all these things, and to fix my audio issues, all it took was $5. Also like to recognize a comment in the Discord in regard to my review of Spider-Man, where I said one of the things I didn't like was the talking through the mask, and I referenced Zack Snyder saying, talking through the masks for superheroes just looks funny, and No Bro Edjo said that was intentional on the filmmaker's part. He said, I think the mask worked for Spider-Man this time because it emphasized how ridiculous it was for him to try to be his best while maintaining a life of solitude where he neglects his own needs. He pointed out that several characters pointed out that he was going to keep his mask on, and perhaps to add to that, the most ridiculous scene being where he had to get into the hot tub with Yelena, and she said to take off his costume so she knew he didn't have weapons, yet he still kept his mask on, and it looked absolutely ridiculous. So now we're left in a spot where we have to say either the filmmakers were bad and didn't realize how ridiculous it looked and sounded, or that it was intentional. And there's two things here. One, as No Bro Edjo points out, there is a preponderance of evidence saying it's intentional with that scene with Yelena, and a number of characters pointing out he still had the mask on. And also, the second thing is, I've always said we analyze with benevolence. Unless proven otherwise, with studios such as A24, we give the creatives, we give the creators of these pieces of art the benefit of the doubt. And especially in this movie where everything else seemed to have gone pretty well. Besides, I point out sort of the enclosed feeling of the way it was shot, that, something that movies can struggle with when they're having a smaller scale, but they also need to have larger scale scenes. And I pointed out the crowd scenes in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Besides that, the only other thing I really had a major issue with was the mask issue. And I would say No Bro Edjo has presented a good argument. So Spider-Man Brand New Day, go check it out. And especially as it looks like there's not really much good coming out or much to be excited about coming out until maybe really the Christmas season. And we'll get into that with the trailers at the end of the episode here. But first, let me bring in my co-host. Joining me this trip from a cabin in the woods not run by Joss Whedon, because who wants things run by Joss Whedon anymore? Identifying as a woman to forgo his white male gay privilege, which also identifying as a woman really makes the cabin have to not be run by Joss Whedon, because we know the problems there. William Green.
Hello. So last week was up in Shasta camping, and I'm back home now, back at the boyfriend's today. But Shasta was great. Spent a lot of time on the water in the boat this week, and we had a pontoon boat a couple days. We had a speedboat a couple days, and it was Justin. It was hot up there. It was 106 was the highest temperature we got. And the other thing about being up there, you're the North Mountains there, from the Sacramento Valley, right where the Sacramento River starts, basically, close to Mount Shasta, and the weather there is so predictable, right? Like it doesn't get hot until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it just stays hot all afternoon, like late until the evening. Like it doesn't cool off like it normally does here closer to the ocean, in the cabin in the woods or in my corner office. But the other thing was, of course, it's summertime, which Justin is fire season, of course, right? And so a couple small fires, some smoke in the air, but overall, really love that there are places, even out here in California, that you can actually see the Milky Way. Like the stars at night actually see the Milky Way. I know that's something you probably don't get to see out there in Orlando that often, unless the power's out or something. But it was a lot of fun and very relaxing. First time in probably 2 years where I was completely, other than my commitment here at the podcast, there was nothing, no computers or phones that I needed to worry about, just some relaxing time on the water. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, being able to disconnect like that and just be part of the world and be reminded of how us being so small can actually be so empowering.
Exactly.
Right? Where you can just sit there and be like, I'm just a small part of this vast universe, this vast existence, and that's sort of the beauty and the magic of it. I do want to push back on something you said, though, where you said in Orlando, I don't get to see the night sky. Now, first of all, I don't live in Orlando proper, right? I'm sort of
right. Yes, of course.
I'm right over the Orange County line, so I'm in the suburbs, outside the suburbs of Orlando. Now, I would also like to push back, though, that Orlando is a mid-sized city. And what I like about it being a mid-sized city and where I live is I can see the night sky if I would like to where I live. The community that I live in was built in a way that being in my community feels sort of isolated from everyone else. But still, when I go outside my community, all the advantages of living in a more suburban area, a more almost urban area with world-class theme parks are right there. So that's part of what I like, that Orlando shows that you can have that balance. Whereas most people don't want to live in major cities because it becomes so densely packed and overwrought with what you're talking about, with the technology and the architecture and the infrastructure, that you miss out on the rest of life, where I think Orlando has a good balance of that, where people usually say suburbs or city. I think we kind of have both here. And we have, if you want the outside of that too. I mean, if you even go on Disney property, they have where you can rent out campsites be able to
I stayed
do
in
that.
those in high school. Yeah. I stayed in they had like the trailers next to the campsites. So I remember staying in the like little trailers next to the campsites. And that was
right. And you can rent out a campsite itself and bring your camping gear. You can stay in a tent. Yep. So they have all sorts of that. And I do think it's sort of, Disney taking the lead on that when, Walt bought the area. And I say Walt, not that I knew him, but it's just, you have to distinguish between Walt the man and the company Disney.
Yep.
Okay, speaking of distinguishing between the man and the organization, everything, I think we're going to have a lot of conversation this week about the individual versus the system and the individual versus the ideology. Let's get into it in Life on the Midside.
Take a good look around. Does life really suck? 'Cause I'm on a roll here. I hope this is making some sense. I hope that you throw up your hands and sing it and tell all the haters that they should just shut up and smile. Yeah.
As always, if you'd like to support the show, you can do so through Patreon or Locals, whichever platform you prefer. That's up to you. Just go to midside.com/Patreon or the midside.com/locals. We accept any and all support. I may add in PayPal on there in a bit too. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Again, change is coming up, not to us, to the world. It's really just Apple, but whatever. All right, first bit of farce we'd like to follow up on is the Anthony Fauci COVID farce continues in our society.
We've got to follow the science.
Yes, we already followed the science. We talked about that. We had our followed the science edition. And actually, it rolls into one of the reviews this week, too, because I saw a couple movies this week. And there was an interesting part of one of the movies related to this. So we'll get to that. But the first thing is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was on the Pat McAfee podcast, and Pat asked him a question. McAfee asked him a question, and Rodgers replied. And we have that drop here.
A couple times today, because you've been very open about coming back for this year, last rodeo, and you talked about your wife saying, hey, have another year. Mike McCarthy being here, obviously a big deal. Can you tell us about the mindset of coming into your last season? Like, that's a real thing, it feels like, because is everything better? Is everything funner? Is everything more awesome? Like, how do you kind of view this year versus maybe the years of the past?
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay. Okay.
Like, gotta love that.
Now, William, this plays to me like a bit, like this was pre-planned.
This is amazing, isn't it, Justin? I mean, I've been calling for COVID reparations. He goes on to call him a coward here in a second, right, too? But it has to be a bit, right? Like this is the first, they go over the segments, right? The producer, the segment producer does it before they go over what questions they're going to ask, and they talk about what jokes they're going to say. So, yeah, this has to be a bit. But think about something like this happening, gosh, and even in 2022 or 2023, right? It would have been canceled for that, right?
They tried to cancel him. They tried to make him seem like an insane person. And that's something to reflect on here is when you think about the last 5 years.
Yeah.
5 years ago, who seemed crazier? Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady? Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers, yeah.
But 5 years later, who seems crazier? Tom Brady, right?
Yeah.
And that's a Tom Brady fan saying that. I mean, inarguably, Tom Brady's the better quarterback. But who would I be friends with more? Who would I want to have a conversation with more? You know, I've always said from the beginning, if I met Tom Brady, I'd just shake his hand and say thank you. I think I would actually have things to talk to Aaron Rodgers about.
Yeah. We talk about
and
COVID
the fact
reparations.
That right, exactly. Well, and what are his thoughts on that, right? Like, do you think that's a legitimate concept or not? Like, it'd be interesting to see what he thinks about that.
Yeah.
Because now he's saying these things and there's not really pushback. The only real pushback was an email was sent from Fauci's lawyer to The Athletic, which is kind of considered to be the most prestigious sports journalism outlet right now.
Okay. Where
they said Aaron Rodgers doesn't know what he's talking about. He should stick to football.
Oh, geez.
Which is
like we've not heard that before.
Right. Remember when they said that about LeBron, where they said, shut up and play basketball?
Yeah.
Or just dribble the ball or whatever it was. And LeBron got really mad and said it was racist. Now, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Oh, yeah.
And please don't.
Racist. Yeah.
Right. Don't turn that into a racist slang. What's good for the goose is good for the. Yeah, don't change that word there, please.
Okay, all right.
I am not saying that. Do not put those words in our mouth. But the point is, if LeBron should be allowed to talk, Aaron Rodgers should be allowed to talk. And if Aaron Rodgers should be allowed to talk, LeBron should be allowed to talk. But I don't think this is about athletes being allowed to talk or not. I mean, the Kelceys have a podcast. They all have podcasts nowadays, right? This isn't about whether we should listen to them or not. It's about what's normalized now. And 5 years later, it's, after what happened, it's normalized to look at this and call it out and think about it. And this is, again, an issue of when it first happened, everyone on the left said that everyone on the right was crazy, or not even on the right. Anyone who was skeptical of the vaccine was crazy. And now it's sort of
conspiracy theorists. Yeah.
Right.
And here we are.
All right. Another bit of follow-up, which is walking down the same path. And what I mean by that is it's the narrative flipping. And we're still in the first part of the narrative. Because, again, I think we saw this with, not 5 years ago, but if you go back to when was Batman versus Superman? 2018, right? Because Man of Steel was 2013. So if you go back to Zack Snyder, they did the same thing to him that they're doing to Nolan. And we're still continuing to see this where people are buying into this narrative. And the narrative, of course, being that Nolan is anti-American and anti-man. So there's a tweet, and I'm not going to say the name of it, but it's a objectivist who tends to go, mini viral in the objectivist community, said the Titan who gave us Interstellar is broken. And William, that's the first sort of, and I'm going to read the rest of this tweet in a second, but the first thing I want to sort of throw at you, see what you say is, that's the first sort of premise that I have a problem with. Whereas if I look at the entirety, or if you look at a general you, looks at the entirety of Christopher Nolan's filmography, right? We're talking about all the way from Following, his first sort of short film, through the Odyssey. And rather than, as we were saying at the top of the show, I was saying at the top of the show, be benevolent or look at the preponderance of evidence and say, well, what is the likely interpretation of the Odyssey here? Say, oh, well, he must be broken. It doesn't follow. From all of Nolan's films and all his work, it doesn't follow. I mean, now, as I always say, you have to look at each movie or each piece of art, qual that piece of art. I don't even think it follows from the piece of art, and we'll talk to that in a second. But simply from Nolan's track record, is it fair? I don't think it's fair at all to say that he's broken.
Yeah, it's even if you accepted their interpretation for this movie, like you said, putting it in the context of the rest of the films, and even looking at his interviews, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it fits with the evidence that we see, right? Like, I haven't seen the film yet, so I can't really comment on the interpretation issue, but certainly from the way he's been interviewed and things like that, he's I don't think that he's quite as plugged in as maybe this ex-user is, right? To the culture war. Like, this seems like people applying the culture war to something that isn't a part of the culture war. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, intentionally part of the culture war. Everything is part of the culture war. No, I agree. It's you bring up the interviews. It's really interesting that every interview that comes out with Nolan now, there's a bunch of people saying this proves that Nolan's an idiot and doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
There's that one interview with the Chinese college student, which I pointed out and said, hey, this shows, Nolan knows what he's talking about. And everybody else saying, oh, this proves that Nolan's an idiot and he's pretentious and he's a pseudo-intellectual. And it's really interesting. Now, the rest of this quote the rest of this tweet goes into Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand predicted the rise of cynicism in unheroic times and gave a word of encouragement to the Nolans of this world. And this is part of why I don't identify fully as an objectivist, that Nolan could just be thrown into another category like this. So, like, Nolan's as bad as A24 is what we're essentially saying right now. It's absolutely insane.
Well,
so here's the Ayn Rand quote.
It's objectivist clickbait, right? It's
right.
Take something popular that's in the popular sort of zeitgeist of discussion and then making some outrageous, claim, right? And then pull an Ayn Rand quote. There you go. Now you're viral.
Right. And this is the quote. In the name of the best within you, do not sacrifice this world to those who are its worst. Do not let your vision of man be distorted by the ugly, the cowardly, the mindless, and those who have never achieved his title. Do not lose your knowledge that man's proper state is an upright posture, an intransigent mind, and a step that travels unlimited roads. Do not let your fire go out, spark by irreplaceable spark, in the hopeless swamps of the approximate, the not quite, the not yet, the not at all. Do not let the hero in your soul perish. The world you desired can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It's yours. And I read this quote, and the irony is, I think that can be applied to Odysseus at the end of the Odyssey. His argument here, the user's argument here, the poster's argument here is going to be that, well, he's a conflicted hero. He returns to Ithaca, but then he has to leave Ithaca because he feels guilty over his quote-unquote war crimes. The phrase war crimes is never used. I'm using that as sort of a shorthand for how he feels. He feels guilt in the same way that I argue America feels guilt still over the use of the atomic bomb on Japan. And so he says he's not worthy of being the ruler of Ithaca, but he then goes outside of Greece and sails into the sunset and thinks of the world is going to be good. Civilization will rise again. And he leaves with his wife. First of all, is that not the ending to The Dark Knight Rises? And again, is the Dark Knight, is Nolan any different than he was back then? No, because the idea was Ithaca, Gotham, got the hero it needed, or was it the hero Gotham needs, not the hero Gotham deserves? Is that what the quote is?
I think so, yeah.
I always get that reversed. But the point is, the way the world currently is doesn't allow someone as upstanding and moral as Odysseus to be celebrated in the world. And the failure is the culture, not Odysseus. Just like that was the point of The Dark Knight, right, William? That the failure was the culture of Gotham, not Batman, because Batman could never be recognized for the good he did for the city.
Right.
He had to allow a poor perception of him to exist. The same thing is happening at the end here. Don't tell me this is not heroic when he slaughters all of the suitors and saves Ithaca and then gives it to his son because it's time for his son to take over. How is that not heroic?
Yeah, it's a medieval hours, like a prehistoric mindset, right? Certainly, it's different, slightly different values, but still universal, right?
Right. And the point I was going to make about those slightly different values is, look at Atlas Shrugged. Is every character in that novel John Galt, the man without pain or fear or guilt? No. But think of all the characters. Does Francisco de Anconia not have guilt? Yes, he has guilt. Right? Do Dagny and Hank not have fear and pain? And oh, look, I pointed out those three. Maybe one represents pain, one represents fear, and one represents guilt. Probably Hank is fear, and it's until he gives up his fear that he, doesn't sanction the victim anymore, but he continues to sanction the victim because he has fear. And then Dagny is probably the pain. I'd have to think about it a little bit more. You could probably argue all three of them have all three, but each represents one majorly, which that's good writing. And we say there's no complexity in Rand. But that's the point. Besides Galt, every other character is flawed or conflicted in some way. Because that's the point, is who is John Galt? Who is the morally perfect person? And it seems like objectivists are always looking for the morally perfect hero in a movie.
Yeah, it's like a Mary Sue. They want to marry Sue for some reason.
Right. And that's not always interesting. You can have stories like that sometimes. But would I prefer that, or would I prefer Die Hard, where you have this character who's incredibly capable and incredibly heroic, but also conflicted in his personal life? Because it's hard to balance him being that heroic with his personal life. And that's a distillation of reality, is it not? Is it not really hard? I mean, what were we just talking about with Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah.
How hard is it to be heroic and socially accepted? Both of them are heroic in very similar ways, very noticeable ways. But then also, doesn't that make it really hard for them to exist socially and be loved and not be conflicted? I mean, look at Aaron Rodgers and his history of relationships, romantic relationships, and everything we were just saying about Fauci and the pandemic. And then look at Tom Brady and his history of romantic relationships and everything he's done socially, public relations wise. I don't know. I do think no one has a very British sensibility. I've said that before, but I also think it's the same sensibility that's in Zack Snyder that a lot of people didn't understand about his portrayal of Superman. Never did he say Superman was depressed, was he guilty, all these emo, all these things he was saying. It's just Superman felt disconnected from the world because of the way the world treated him. And because of his different experience than everyone else. And it's the same thing here with Odysseus. Do people not recognize the journey Odysseus goes on? Is that not like a harrowing, changing, a journey that will change you?
Yeah.
It's just interesting that a philosophy that's considered to be complex causes people to oversimplify it and oversimplify art.
Yeah.
All right, let's move forward to something that, to me, if we're going to talk about Ayn Rand, this hits a sweet spot from the Fountainhead for me. I don't know if you thought of the Fountainhead here, William. I did. This is why celebrities from Zendaya to Kylie Jenner are wearing fecal matter. Now, I know that sounds like they actually have poop smeared on them, but it's referring to a fashion brand, and I'll read about it in a second. But I immediately thought of, William, the group of pretentious artists in the Fountainhead.
Yeah. And
reading the Gallant Gallstone.
Yeah.
And how that was basically Ayn Rand predicting A24 before A24.
Yeah.
And,
or current publishing houses, right?
Right. I mean, to me, A24 is the motion picture equivalent of these current publishing houses.
Yeah.
When we look at something like I Saw the TV Glow. And by the way, that guy I Saw the TV Glow has another movie that's coming out. And if you watch the trailer, it makes about as much sense as I Saw the TV Glow. But this one has, what's her name from X-Files in it? Who played Scully in the X-Files? Gillian Anderson?
Anderson, yeah.
Is that it? Because Jillian Jacobs is from Community, and that always confuses me. Regardless, Ayn Rand with the Gallant Gallstone was pointing out the irony, right? That a gallstone, something that's negative and destructive, can be considered a good thing. And that, that's in that book, that seemed absurd and over the top and a caricature of what these people are doing. But then somebody literally names their fashion brand Fecal Matter. So to read from this article here, the brand name behind recent show-stopping fashion moments isn't quite as delicate as their romantic and otherworldly looks. And again, with Zendaya, this is something I pointed out since Spider-Man Homecoming, where they made her look like a masculine stoner burnout in Spider-Man Home. And now they've since changed that, and they've actually sort of, let her be the beauty that she is. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to prefer Zendaya, but she is good looking. I'm not really a big Zendaya fan look-wise. But when asked what an ethereal Zendaya was wearing for the Odyssey premiere in New York, her stylist, Law Roach, responded, Fecal Matter. Imagine saying that. And that's a discussion I'm going to have with you in a second, William, regardless of how good the dress is, would you buy it if you had to say that?
Yeah, exactly. No. I would. What? Can you imagine? Imagine calling a restaurant that. Right? It's just as bad, right?
That's even worse, actually.
Yeah, I'm eating
because you're consuming
tonight.
Things.
Yeah. It's I don't know. It's sort of it's the A24 of fashion. Is that what's going on?
I mean, look, I'm not enough of an expert in fashion, nor have I actually looked at the pictures to know about the quality of the fashion, but you raise an interesting question. To continue reading, Zendaya's angelic strapless gown with feathered white wings was the work of Materias Fecalas. That's me trying to say French as best as possible. Yes, in English, Fecal Matter, the Paris-based high-end fashion house founded in Montreal over a decade ago that's seemingly suddenly everywhere. The design duo behind Materias Fecalas, Stephen Raj Bhaskaran and Hannah Rose Dalton, have aimed to subvert beauty with their own alien-like personal style, including dramatic white makeup, shaved heads and eyebrows, and skin boots made to look like realistic feet. I mean, that's another thing about, like, are those the kind of people you want to design your fashion?
Not at all. Not
Regardless.
Yeah.
Bhaskaran and Dalton started the brand as students at College La Salle, Montreal, going from selling designs on the secondhand shopping platform Depop to showcasing collections at Paris Fashion Week. The designers have said the name reflects their view of the fashion industry, a perspective they initially summed up with a more vulgar word. And now we're quoting Dalton. Mm-hmm. There's no word for it, but how can we say it in a glamorous way? So we're like, fecal matter is the scientific word for it. She said she was talking to Vogue last year. They translated it to French, which, continuing the quote, sounds way more glamorous. And that the name was intended to challenge the wasteful side of fashion. So,
sure.
There's a couple things here. One, William, you said sure sarcastically, and that's the first question. Do they actually believe that, or is this all done because they care more about popularity than actually designing things well, and all they're doing is sort of giving, I can't remember the word, but just sort of giving words to what they need to in order to stay popular? Because if you really thought fashion was wasteful, you wouldn't get into it, right? Because you would think it's so immoral.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's sort of like a very sort of Gen X, like we're being ironic, but not really, right? We're still buying into it.
Right.
We're trying to be ironic.
Right. It's like you take hipsters, but you do it seriously.
Yeah.
You know, hipsters were doing everything ironic, but it actually was ironic. Hipsters were intentionally doing ugly things to be ugly. Whereas it's like, oh yeah, we're doing it to be ugly. But it's like, no, they actually want to be ugly. It's not ironic. It's not making a statement about how they're not allowed to be beautiful. It's just they don't believe that trying it can be successful. So they just put effort into being ugly because they think they're going to be ugly anyway. Well, that actually kind of answers the second thing I was going to say is, it's not even an issue of like, would you want to say you're wearing fecal matter? Can someone who names their fashion line fecal matter even make something beautiful?
I don't think so. Yeah. I guess in a way it's the goal is to be ugly. Like this is like post subversion, right? It's like, I'm struggling to explain it, but it's sort of like, okay, we've subverted, so we've destroyed it that way. Now we're just gonna say fuck it, right? We're just not even gonna we're just gonna be ugly to be ugly.
Well, it's sort of, to look at it from not in a Marxist lens in the sense that we're going to use Marxism to understand it. We're going to understand it from the perspective that this is Marxism in action. And what I mean by that is we talk about how Marxism is the process of constant upheaval, right? Where you destroy the power structure, then you build a new power structure, which that power structure must then be destroyed. Well, we talk about if nihilism is true, the only logical conclusion is suicide, death, right? There's no such thing as value, so there's no point in living. Well, the same thing, if Marxism is true, those who are living in the stage of destruction have to accept that all that's possible is destruction, so beauty isn't possible. And so ultimately what Marxism teaches, and this is what people don't realize, and when I say teaches, I mean it experientially teaches that beauty is not possible. There is only destruction. There is only suffering. And that's part of why Marxism ends up the way it does, because people just have to accept that all they're going to be is in the breadlines and they're not going to have great things in life. And this is an example of it. This is, I would say, a warning sign of Marxist ideas having taken hold. We can't really make beautiful fashion, so we are just going to exist in the destruction of the fashion industry while we are part of it. And when we're talking about destruction of an entire industry, this was a story that you really wanted to talk about, William. It's this guy, Jason Arday, from, I don't want to say from the University of Cambridge, but what I'm going to do here, William, is I'm going to read 4 paragraphs here from this New Statesman article that says, who's to blame for Jason Arday? Yeah, which, I mean, I think the answer for that question is his parents, yeah, right? But it doesn't literally mean like who brought him into the world. It's not even him really personally, because I think part of what is interesting to me about this is it's sort of depersonalized in this way, in the same sense that we were just talking about this, you know, there's nothing really serious in Fecal Matter, the brand. It's sort of intentionally not serious. You know, Jason Arday's, you know, publicly not really a person. And it's partially his own fault, but it's partially the culture's fault, which this article goes into. But it's interesting to me, William, and I'll give you a chance to respond to this before I read these paragraphs. It's interesting to me that he's more of an idea than a man, but also the idea in itself is hollow. It's all image. It's all presentation. There's nothing substantive in the image. Okay, I'm going to read the paragraphs here.
All right.
The Jason Arday affair has turned into a global furor. Arday is a young black man who in 2023, at the age of 37, was appointed professor of sociology at the University of Cambridge. First warning sign here, William. No, I'm not going to say it's because he's black. Stop trying to anticipate. It's that he's a professor of sociology. That's the first warning sign here. Because, and this is in these paragraphs a little bit, the first sort of fields in departments in academia that are hit are the social sciences. And actually, we'll see this in our story about the University of Michigan in a minute. The scandal erupted after Arday was accused of plagiarism in his PhD thesis, among other publications, and of pepping up his biography with fake stories of remarkably diverse personal achievements. His fantasized triumphs range from authoring a non-existent book to running a 600-mile charity marathon that would have defeated a prime Mo Farah. This is where I'm talking about image and everything, people turning off their brains. Because if somebody writes 600-mile charity marathon, I have serious questions about that. I'm talking like, did you do this over a period of 6 months where you ran to a city and then slept in a hotel for 3 days? And then, like, what are the logistics of that? Because I've never heard of a 600-mile charity marathon before.
It's like several ultra marathons in a row, right?
Right. Despite initial protests from staff at Cambridge, his PhD supervisors at Liverpool, John Moores University, and many academic colleagues across the country, the allegations mounted to a point of demanding a formal investigation. Arday resigned on August 5th, which also, and this is what you first pointed out, William, he resigned with there was plagiarism in his PhD from AI. His resignation letter was also written by
I love it. Right. I love it. Well, and can we actually count, just to pause the story for a second, can we actually count that he's resigned? Because Claudine Gay is still being paid at Harvard. If you remember, she was the dean or whatever that at Harvard that plagiarized, all of her papers were plagiarized, her thesis and everything. And they're still paying her, Justin. She, quote unquote, resigned, but they're still paying her.
Yeah, there's a line here that's interesting is there's a financial corruption here with these people still being paid. And we don't know if Arday is still being paid or not.
We don't, but I say it's likely.
I say it's likely as well, but we can't confirm or deny it. But isn't there a level of good being done here that they're not in the classroom teaching students? Well,
I've heard there's some people discussing suing the school because this was another story. This story just has so many layers to peel back. Apparently, his teaching was so bad, and people complained, and then the people complained. They got charged with racism and then given bad grades in class, and now those people are considering suing. Now that all this has come out.
Yeah, and I mean, they should sue. And that basically covers the second paragraph here, right, where it's saying there were critiques of all over about what caused this, and then he became the scapegoat for decline in academic standards.
The scapegoat?
So I'm going to now...
Wait a minute. Isn't he more like the exemplar?
Well, that's where this is complicated, right, where he's both the scapegoat and the exemplar. Arday appeared to Cambridge management as a young, rather sensitive black man from a poor background who had surmounted extreme personal difficulties
that
to
he
achieve
made up.
wonders.
That he made up.
Well, yes, it does say appeared. The article does say appeared. Aligning nicely with the diktats of critical race theory, he was a spectacular made-to-measure poster boy for a university trying to demonstrate its anti-racist credentials. Employing Arday allowed Cambridge to present vanities, and again, appearance, vanity, of fairness, tolerance, and pristine meritocracy as realities to the general public, and to sell an attractive PR image to government. He was not an opportunity to be missed. Whereas this is where he is both sort of the scapegoat, the victim, and the perpetrator here. The system is set up in such a way that it incentivized him to lie and to act in this way. So it was sort of like mutual parasites taking advantage of each other. Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how you go from, I think he was like an English major or creative writing or something, right? He went from a no-name college in the UK to a professor in sociology, like a graduate student in sociology, to a sociology professor, like in record time, Justin.
Right.
Like,
well,
because I guess he used his creative writing well, right?
Right. And because he was incentivized to do that. I mean, and that's where what this last paragraph says. What you're talking about is fast-tracked. We can't help but wonder how many academics have been a little too hastily fast-tracked to the top tier for reasons other than discipline leading intellectual sophistication. Conversely, have others with the required qualities been overlooked and restricted to the lower tiers? Arday is neither a victim nor a crook, just an ambitious young man with a penchant for telling tall tales, actively recruited by a system keen to capitalize on his image. And I would actually argue it. I would say they're trying to say neither. I would actually say he's both. He's a victim and he's a crook, where he's a victim of the corrupt culture that he grew up in and was raised in, has taught him that it's better to be a crook than it is to be a upstanding person. Because as it's pointing out, people who actually have ability and credentials are passed over in favor of someone who allows essentially these universities to virtue signal. And I would argue, William, it goes down to funding. This is the corruption we've been talking about. We've talked about for years that colleges are essentially money laundering schemes. At least, I mean, this is British, but I mean, as I say, England is much further down the line than the U.S. is. But in the U.S., these universities are money laundering schemes for the left, essentially.
Yeah.
Where you raise tuition because you give everybody loans from the government. And then those loans are used to pay the higher tuition. The higher tuition is used to pay the academics the professors, the PhDs, and then the professors do what? Donate to the Democrats and vote left wing. That's the scheme here. So, of course, who are they going to want? They're going to want someone like Arday who, one, makes them look good because you're asking about fiction. His story is a fictional story that they're pretending is real in order to make it seem like their ideas are actually effective in reality, because otherwise, they exist in these ivory towers disconnected from the real world.
Yeah.
And then who's he going to be loyal to because they've given him his life? So the cycle continues. It's just the escalation of the cycle they created in order to build their power base and create their infrastructure in order to stay in power.
Yeah, I want to come at this from a different angle. Peter Boghossian, if you remember, he's the one along with James Lindsay and the lady, I forget her name, wrote those papers back in the day, right? The made up papers, and got them published in all the made up sociology journals.
Yes,
and he was bringing up the fact that this is, all these universities, these are the supposedly elite universities, right? And there's no concern about the plagiarism, right? They cover it up. They don't care. They change in fact, they are taking down the thesis, the doctoral theses of all, or thesi, what's the plural of theses? Of all of their DEI studies professors, and deans and stuff, so that people won't analyze them for AI and plagiarism. They're taking down their plagiarism policies from the public, and because in other words, they're circling the wagons around the staff and not around the institution. And the whole idea of plagiarism,
or how about not around reality?
Yeah. The whole idea around plagiarism, right, is you are in academia, you are building knowledge brick by brick, right? And you're using citations so that you can go back down that hierarchy to check and challenge premises, right? And so when you just outright plagiarize, you're basically just smashing that infrastructure, right? And that's why it's
right. Well, that's why it affects us. That's why it affects the social sciences first. Yeah. Because in the hard sciences, at a certain point, the base premise you're going all the way back to is reality.
Right. An
so
experiment.
There's no way of hiding this stuff. It's all out in the open.
Yeah. And so you're just smashing all of this, and the idea that an institution would just not care, right? Would not be immediately, policing this, right? Is just outrageous. And you have to ask really dumb questions. And he did. I actually listened to an interview he did last week. You actually have to ask, is this because they're black, right? Is this an indigenous way of knowing, Justin? Are we smashing the white knowledge system of citations and, not plagiarizing? Like, is that what's going on here, right?
So you're going back to that chart of what white supremacy is, and white supremacy is staying up or arriving on time.
Arriving on
is
time.
White supremacy.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Not plagiarizing, that's white supremacy.
Right. That wasn't on the list, but it might be on the list before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because this is how they would argue it, that it's not really plagiarism. It's that knowledge is collective and doesn't belong to anyone.
Yeah.
So anyone can exert ownership over it and use it. To which, we would reply, yes, you just cite your source. So people don't think it's just coming from inside your head, because you need to prove things are external to you. But then, of course, they would say, well, everything is internal to everyone, and it's shared consciousness and shared knowledge. And that's the entire point. I mean, and we'll get into it in the first movie trailer about how, Islam is just coming from a completely different ideological, psychological, philosophical perspective, and you can't understand it. It's the same thing here. where these people have a better understanding of who they're against than the people they're against have an understanding of them. And what I mean by that is it's just not possible to understand how they exist every day. It's antithetical to what we believe. Whereas they've lived in our world and they just don't like it and they're choosing to evade it. Did you see the difference, William?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, I think that goes into I don't know if it's more destructive or not, but the story you pointed out, it's from Netu Arnold, who is I don't want to say reporter. She's an employee of the Manhattan Institute focusing on education. And she found that the University of Michigan is going to hide first semester grades on transcripts for students in the College of Literature, Science, and Arts. Talk about evasion, William. Here's from Michigan. Beginning in the fall of 2027, the college will designate all LSA first-year students' first semester grades as pass or no credit on their transcripts. Final grades will not be recorded on their external transcripts and will not be reflected in their GPAs. We believe that covering grades will help students start strong and curb the mental health crisis unfolding among college-aged individuals. And of course, a cognate of this is they had to cover everyone's, because if you only cover the people with bad grades, well, then it's easy to infer who has the bad grades and who has the good grades, so you have to cover everyone. But this is, to me, they're saying it's for mental health, but this hurts mental health more, because part of the adjustment of freshman year of high school and freshman year of college is that everything gets turned up a notch. The discipline gets turned up a notch. The
independence.
Academics, the what?
The independence gets turned up a notch.
Yeah, the independence is another one too. The discipline, the academics, and the independence all get turned up a notch in high school freshman year, college freshman year. And you're taking that away from them. You're forcing them to adapt later. So you're pushing back everything. And, this is part of the overall conversation of have we extended adolescence and pushed back adulthood? And again, what college is this happening in? Literature, science, and the arts. So again, this is with the, you were just talking about Arday and social science and fiction, and you were like, how does a fiction author apply to this? The line is not there anymore between fiction and nonfiction in the social sciences, and this is an example of it. Isn't this all fiction?
Yeah, we're just going to pretend like the first semester didn't happen, right? You didn't put on your freshman 15. You didn't, sleep through an exam. You didn't, Well,
I'm gonna push back on a term you used there. Not because I think you're doing this, but because I think freshman 15 is a term that started as evasion of reality and pushing things back.
Yeah,
and I used to be much more benevolent with freshman 15, saying, these are people who played sports in high school and don't play sports anymore, and they're eating an extreme amount when they never used to. And I do think there are elements of that, but also now teaching at a public school, I know that all these kids do is snack on unhealthy things all day.
All day. I hanging out with kids at Shasta. Yeah, they're snacking all the time. Jesus Christ.
Right, and it's unhealthy stuff. Like, I don't know, at Shasta how many Taki bags you saw, but these kids are always hungry, and then they're eating Takis, and I'm like, well, why do you think you're hungry? If I sat around and ate Twinkies all day, I'd never be full because I'm not getting any nutrition. My body would always be craving those nutrients, but I'd be getting fatter and fatter, and that's what they're doing. And, my classes this year are going to have a rude awakening when I say no food is allowed at all. I used to allow snacks. I said, if you want to bring in a little bag of chips, you can. But then two things happened. The bags of chips kept getting bigger. They would literally go and buy a bulk bag of chips and then bring it to school. Like, who does that? And two, then they'd start trading. I had classes last year where all it was trading snacks all day. like some sort of underground black market of snacks. And none of it's healthy. So it just becomes a distraction. And then, the argument may become, somebody may push back from this, left-wing perspective, this anti-reality perspective that, they're all hungry and none of them can properly engage in school if they're not, or if they're hungry. So you're going to have to let them eat, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there. The point being about freshman 15, though, is I used to really believe, or used to really be generous and say it's because they're eating more and they're more inactive. No, they're already like that in high school. The freshman 15 is really just code for people binge drinking.
Yeah.
It's just really code for they're going out every night and they're consuming mass amounts of beer, and those carbohydrates are just putting on weight. That's all it is. That's what the freshman 15 means. That's, again, independence and discipline. Maybe if we taught independence and discipline and we didn't say, we just need to make it safe for them to party, not just we need to teach them the dangers of partying.
No, we need to teach them, like this professor, to just write stories about the random inane things that they did and then get a PhD in it. I mean, that's basically this branch of sociology he was in. So just write inane stories about yourself, little anecdotes about yourself.
Yeah, dude, I got people mad at me one day in one of my fiction writing classes because a student submitted a story about a college girl going out and partying. And it was a girl who submitted the story. And I asked the question, I said, is this fiction or is this something that really happened? And, people got mad. They were like, she can write whatever she wants as fiction. And that wasn't my point in asking the question. My point was, would anyone actually want to read this? Is this interesting? Or is this you trying to deal with whatever you're dealing with? So this, again, this has been going on for years. I mean, I talk about Ithaca, Berkeley, and Boulder, but my question for you as a University of Michigan graduate is, to me, every story that comes out from there pushes them closer to Ithaca, Berkeley, and Boulder. How long has Michigan been like this, William? And would you say they're on the same level as Ithaca, Berkeley, and Boulder as far as far left college towns?
Yeah. Well, I went to the engineering college, right? And also LS&A, or as we would say in the engineering college, LS and Play. So yes, LSA has the sort of distinction of being one of the colleges at the university that is where you can get away with anything, and certainly departments that require less rigor. And that's been around even during the sort of the pre-woke era, right? During the PC era, I guess. I don't know how bad it is on campus now, but I think that there are just certain, rather than thinking about it in terms of which schools, Justin, I think it's more thinking about which departments, and in those departments, which ones have the political sway. And again, I don't know the particulars at Michigan, but the sciences are getting pushed out of the sort of leadership role in a lot of the colleges, and sort of the hard sciences, right? And it's sort of been taken over by these, the professor in the last story, right? It has sort of taken over. So I don't know that I can say specifically for Michigan, but I think this is across the board, and I don't know what is the next step that happens here, Justin, other than total destruction of all of these colleges, right? I don't know how do you recover from something like this, right? The plagiarism stuff plus we're just going to hide your grades, right? This disconnect from reality. There's no where is their anchor to reality where they can recover, Justin? It's like they've jumped off the ship and there's no what's the little ring? The when you throw the little ring with a rope on it overboard,
life preserver.
Right? Yeah, life preserver. There's no life preserver for them. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
nothing for them to hold on to, right? It's not tied to anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the last story where I was talking about the money laundering scheme of academia. I mean, that's really what it was, or what it is. And yeah, the question is, how do we go from here? But then I also look at, every time I watch TV, Southern New Hampshire University is advertising their online degree program. And I'm in Florida. So for Southern New Hampshire University to be that successful, to be able to do that, I think there is a balance going on here where there are more people going more towards these technical degrees and these online degrees in order to actually learn the skills they need to, versus people going to these more academic institutions. And I don't know. I don't have an answer, except life finds a way, not to quote Jurassic Park, but to a certain extent, people are talking about, inflation of the economy. People are going to have to start making choices not based on what they're supposed to do and what the cultural trends are anymore. How long can all of these families send kids away for 4-year parties that they come back with a shitload of debt and no real job prospects?
Well, and also fucked up morality and fucked up epistemology, right?
Before they start saying, oh, no, you need to think about what you're going to do to actually make money and be successful in the world so this family can continue. And I think we're headed more towards the direction of people are realizing that than not. It's just another Jenga piece in the tower, right? And does it all collapse and all fall apart, or do we figure these things out little by little and it all starts pushing back together? I don't know. It's an interesting discussion. All right. That's enough about all this highfalutin political, philosophical stuff. But I guess I say that, but we're going to get into some movie reviews in The Hopeful Romantic with JML.
Put me into syndication, broadcast to a network station of people viewing their favorite episodes. I can't find a new pitch to throw the studio. I need a rerun to better cast the next series of events. In the air timeline left, my made-for-TV type was written off in the last season when I wasn't focused on.
As always, if you'd like to continue the conversation with us during the week, you can do so by joining our Discord channel. Just go to themidside.com/podcast or themidside.com. Click on any episode link, and in there you'll find our Discord join code. You can tell every week I'm responding to people via the show. I'm responding in the Discord because I love to hear from you, and I love to hear your perspectives on movies and on what I watched, and maybe you're watching the same things at the same time I am. I mean, I love No Bro Ed Joe's comment about Spider-Man and the mask thing and how it fit into the theme. I thought that was great work, and I appreciated it because it helped deepen my understanding of it. And I'll probably watch Brand New Day again one day, maybe before the eventual X-Men movie. I don't know. We'll see when I watch it again. But when I do, I'll keep that in mind, and it'll deepen my joy of it, because that's what I'm trying to do here. When I review movies here, and I'm going to review a couple in a second, I'm trying to help you enjoy movies more. I'm not just trying to tell you what to see and what not to see. I'm really trying to tell you, is this worth seeing or not, and why? What's the value of it? As we're seeing, the first movie I'm going to review here, One Night Only. Actually, with both these movies, I'm going to review One Night Only and The Dink. One Night Only I saw in theaters, The Dink I saw on Apple TV, and both of these movies had stuff that was worth it and stuff that wasn't. So let's start with One Night Only, William. Do you remember the trailer for One Night Only?
Yeah, let me remember. One Night Only.
It's a romantic comedy.
Yes.
About a world.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you remember in the trailer what the special thing about the world was?
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, One Night Only is the world in which premarital sex is outlawed except for one night of the year.
Oh, okay. Yes. I do remember that.
Yeah. Now, Letterboxd is currently down, so I don't know my exact one-sentence reviews here, but I can give approximations. And my approximate here is, this is literally, and I'm using the word literally, one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen.
Nice.
But the director and the actors really approach it with a level of quality and benevolence. And what I mean by that is the following. This is a romantic comedy about people who meet each other in an absurd situation, and they don't realize how well suited they are for each other in that absurd situation until they start having to deal with the absurdity together, even though they are initially resistant to it. And eventually they fall in love and they find a moral core inside of the absurdity. Now, none of that's a spoiler. That's the basic beats of a romantic comedy. It's just sort of like a romantic comedy meets sort of like a road trip type movie. And what I mean by a road trip is it's increasingly absurd situations. That's the good part about this movie. It's brightly lit. The cinematography is pleasant. The actors are very benevolent. They're very nice people. They portray their characters in a kind way, in a likable way. So even though this could have been done in a very, quirky, annoying California, Los Angeles way, the characters aren't done that way. So that makes it sort of enjoyable. Now, what makes this one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen? Well, William, when I tell you about the premise, what does that premise require if you're doing that movie?
Well, you need to have, I don't know what you're going for, because I was thinking more along the lines of what kind of characterization you would need to make that premise work. You need likable characters. You need likable characters that you need the one that plays it more straight, one that is maybe a little bit more a little bit more over the top, right? To play off each other. I was thinking about the ingredients of it, but I'm not sure where you're going with the premise here.
No, I'm talking about the premise of it's a world where premarital sex is outlawed except for one night. Okay. What does that premise require? I'm not talking about the basic setup. They do the basic setup of the characterization where the girl's a little more over the top and the guy's a little more straight man. Straight. But that's that's typical gender dynamics, right? That's why romantic comedies are enduring, because they have that. And they do that part of it well. I'm talking about the premise of this is the one night a year where premarital sex is...
Well, there's got to be something. There's got to be some setup about why, right? Like, what's the thing stopping them, right? Or what's the
right? So, to build on that, I would even go a step further. There needs to be cohesive world building, because it's not only what's the one thing; it's how is the world fundamentally different. Yeah. And the basic premise, the basic problem with this premise, the application of this premise that makes this movie dumb, is there. That's not there. The world is not fully built out. It's largely the same world. It's just everyone's super horny and jumping each other on this one night. Now, they do have TV news broadcasts explaining the one night thing. And they do have a conversation that explains it. And you find out that everybody at a certain point, and again, this is where it's very unclear, because at what age do you have this installed? You get a sensor installed in your forearm. And if it's green, you're allowed to have sex. And if it's red, you're not allowed to have sex. And so anyone who's not married, their sensor is red. And everyone who's married, their sensor is green. And then one night a year, everyone's sensor is green. And this sensor was created by like a tech pharmaceutical company. And, one of the conversations that explains this is a girl is talking to, it may have even been the main girl, is talking to the guy who works for, a guy who works for the pharmaceutical company. And he talks about other things that are going to come throughout the movie or come throughout the universe. At certain points, people complain about, not directly or explicitly, they complain about the Christian right. They call they call it the mandate. They call the mandate fascists. But then at the end of the movie, like the two main characters, and I guess you can hit spoiler now.
There's walkers in the barn and Lori's pregnant.
They finally admit that they've basically fallen in love over this night. And in the morning, as the sun dawns, they decide they're going to wait the whole year till they have sex. So even though the movie is sort of saying the mandate is immoral, it's unethical, it's fascist, the characters recognize the value of it by the end of the movie. And, you know, this sort of reminded me of the 40-Year-Old Virgin, where he waits to get married before he has sex for the first time. And whereas the 40-Year-Old Virgin, there's no laws involved, this is just his character, and it's fully realized what his life looks like, right? Like, his job makes sense with the fact that he's a 40-year-old virgin. He works at basically a Best Buy, even though he's 40 years old. He has that basic retail job, and his life is very sealed off that way. I mean, they even do the metaphor of, like, you collect all these action figures and don't open them because it's a metaphor for you, right? Here, they don't have that fully built out in this movie. And it just makes it hard to get into the movie, because on one hand, you have this really interesting sort of premise, and it does intersect with the characters at the end of the movie, but it's not fully realized throughout. And of course, I don't think it's intended to be. I don't think the intended audience is that. But it also is like The Purge, where the reason I've never gotten into the Purge movies is the first movie, even though The Purge is about how all crime is legal for one night, the first Purge movie is just about one family. It's just about Ethan Hawke in his house trying to stop people from breaking in. So even though you have this tremendous premise, it's incredibly small scale. Now, to the point, or to the praise of the first Purge movie, it only focuses on that one story, so you don't think as much about the external world. Whereas, I mean, these people are literally in New York City going around to all these different parties and meeting all these different people. So you should be seeing a much different alternate New York City in the same way you see that alternate New York City in Watchmen. And I've probably given far too much thought to this movie. I probably gave more thought to this movie than the writers gave and most of the audience gave. Essentially, this is 2 out of 5 stars. This is no, bro. The next movie I saw was The Dink. I know you remember the trailer to this. Yes, William?
Yeah.
And I think that you hugged this trailer just as I did.
Yeah.
Now, the one-sided review is essentially this is a two-sided movie, whereas this movie succeeds when Jake Johnson, the lead, is channeling his inner Nick Miller from New Girl. That's the character he got famous for and is most known for, where you have this guy who's in this absurd situation where he was really good at tennis, and then he got to the pro level and sort of flamed out. And now he is a tennis pro at a club where pickleball is starting to become more popular. And this causes him to reassess his identity. And that's an absurd situation that you can mine for a lot of comedy, and it does. But what makes this a strange movie is the political subtext that is brought in by the necessarily Los Angeles perspective. And what I mean by that is the movie starts out with this character works for his dad. His dad runs the tennis club, and he works for his dad. And his dad is saying, we have to defend the club from these pickleballers because pickleball is absurd. It's not a real sport. And there's a story there. It's, you know, where does pickleball fit into society? Is it a real sport? What's its purpose of it? I mean, at one point, Andy Roddick in the movie makes a joke. Oh, I get this. This is tennis, but easier, right? There's a whole story there. But here's the problem. The villain of this story ends up being the dad. So, you know how Adam Carolla, William, always talks about, like, the people who hate Trump are the people who hate their dads?
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of what this movie becomes. And what I mean by that is there's a really interesting scene where he's giving a presentation to his son and the other people who work at the club about how they have to defend it from pickleball. And he uses the metaphor of COVID. And he says, we're the vaccine against these pickleballers. And he makes the joke, and it's a very funny joke. He said, and, we have to give them this vaccine so we never hear from them again, even though the numbers are pretty much the same. Now, this is what we were just talking about with the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. It has become acceptable to joke about this.
Yeah.
Except I have to interpret this in two different ways. When I first watched that scene, I was like, wow, this is a starkly, almost right-wing, almost libertarian scene. Because it's pointing out that the vaccine actually didn't do anything. It was just, virtue signaling, or it was the corruption of Fauci, and the numbers haven't changed. But now, if we look at it and we consider that the dad is the villain, the point is, in that scene, he was being a conspiracy theorist, and that we actually don't treat COVID as seriously as we should because the numbers are the same. Mm. Do you see how you can look at the scene two different ways?
Yeah, it's the two movies, Scott Adams' two movies thing.
Right. Now, do I think any of this subtext was intentional? No, I think this was really meant to be a movie about the main character, Jake Johnson's character, finding out who he truly is himself and learning not to fold under the pressure. And there's a whole parallel here of him with Andy Roddick as his rival and things like that. And there's a good story in here. I don't think they needed to make the dad be the enemy here, because ultimately this is about rather than it being about him and battle with himself, which is there. Ultimately, the greater conflict is him trying to win his dad's approval, which also makes for a jarring ending because his dad just has a sudden switch at the end. So it's just, this is an example of there could have been a much better movie if they could get out of their, Los Angeles perspective. But it's really hard when you've lived in Los Angeles and you're aware of all this stuff to not see the way in which they held themselves back. I mean, there's even a point here where they talk about how if you live in the Los Angeles area or anywhere not in the South and you like country music, you're discriminated against. And so I saw those two scenes in succession. Mm. Early in the movie, it's the COVID joke with the country music joke. I was like, wow, they're really getting at something here. They're really not afraid to be honest. I was like, Apple TV is really not afraid to be honest. But then we have to question, how much is Apple going the same way where Amazon Prime is, where they release these sort of movies that could be in theaters, but they're held back because of the ideology. So they just release them on their platforms as a way of trying to gain prestige and trying to gain clicks, basically. It's almost like virtue signaling through a movie. Anyway, this movie is slightly better than One Night Only just because it doesn't carry the same burden that movie carries. I mean, with One Night Only, why create that movie and then go forward with it? Mm. Like, you're creating such a burden. Do you want to do the rom-com where they meet each other on an absurd night, or do you want to do the political allegory movie?
Yeah.
Putting them together just creates a cumbersome. Whereas this is just, this is a story about tennis versus pickleball through the lens of somebody who is trying to find himself. And it has the comedic stylings that make Jake Johnson funny. And it does show me that if somebody can really figure out how to take advantage of Jake Johnson's comedic stylings, he could be very successful. But as of now, this is just I don't know. I put this right in the middle. This is 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's a romantic movie. It has the basic beats and everything, and the ideology and the ideas I talked about are more buried in there, and you can get past all that stuff. It's not the primary. All right, those are movies that are out. Let's talk about some movies that are going to come out. Usually, I post the trailers for Trailer Takedown in Discord the Saturday before we record. So you can watch them when you want, maybe before the episode, maybe after the episode, maybe you alternate. And I'll be very interested in what everybody and what William thinks of the trailers this week, because I think we've got some doozies here, and I don't necessarily mean that in a good way.
Trailer Takedown. First trailer.
Run, height, Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels is the a full official trailer of the movie that we did the teaser trailer for earlier. Stars Jonathan Majors. It seems like he's an academic lecturer, and then there's an Islamic terror attack on campus. Now, that premise in itself could be a good movie. And I do appreciate the perspective this takes on Islam. However, this trailer is incredibly didactic. Also, this trailer, I think, gives everything away. I even think it has a shot from the moment where Jonathan Majors' character is triumphant at the end, and he has beaten back the terrorists. But you don't need a academic lecture that is more Twitter rhetoric than it is academic and intellectual over the terrorist attack happening. It just becomes incredibly didactic, and nobody is going to listen to the message, especially with how important it is. This is an example of, to me, the right trying to emulate what the left does, what I was just discussing with One Night Only and the Dink, where what the people on the right don't understand is it is such just second nature to people that these are unquestioned premises when they write things, such as with the Dink, that when you try to be heavy-handed, it comes across as fake and unnecessary because they're not trying to be heavy-handed. To them, it's just a given. So a movie like this could work premise-wise, but this execution is just completely, to me, is just completely off-putting. Tackle.
Yeah, it's it's got the pieces of a movie that I might like, bad guys running around, drama, but it's just ham-fisted is the best way I can describe it. So
yes.
Yeah, I don't think that this is it. This is
ironic that you said ham-fisted when it has to deal with Islam.
Exactly.
Sorry.
I know. So yeah,
Tackle. Second trailer.
The only living pickpocket in New York. Okay, so for these next two trailers, actually for all these trailers, I just want to put them just the next three. I just want to put them on sort of like a spectrum. To me, the only living pickpocket in New York is like a step above an A24 movie. Was Uncut Gems A24? Can you look that up really quick? Because this reminds me of like Uncut Gems, just slightly more bearable. So this is literally about a pickpocket. And he's charismatic, and he's nice, and he's intelligent, but he's still a pickpocket. And what happens is he pickpockets somebody from a rich family, and they find him and they threaten him unless he gets the card back to them, but the card has been sold or whatever happens on this market of pickpockets and this underground black market. And then he's in a crisis because he has to try and save himself. This is giving me, what is it, Dexter season 2 or season 3? I think it's season 2, where the car flipped over at the beginning of the season, and you're supposed to want Dexter to get away, but I was just like, bro's a serial killer. Like, I don't want him to get away. Well, it's the same thing here. The acting performance can be as good as it is, and it's a great performance here. The cinematography is pretty crisp. It can be as crisp as it wants. This guy can be as affable and as likable as he wants, but I'm not going to have sympathy for a pickpocket. I don't care. Like, my thought when he pickpocketed the wrong person and they threatened him and he's having trouble, I was like, good, maybe he'll get caught. That's why I'm saying this is a step above an A24 movie. It's trying to have that moral complexity and ambiguity that A24 has, but it's not as sort of like dour and disgusting. But it's still, to me, Tackle.
Yeah, let's mix an affable character with a despicable job, and then I don't know what is he gonna have a heart of gold at the end? Is he gonna give up pickpocketing?
Yeah, Uncut Gems is A24, by the way.
Yeah. So
continue, sorry.
Yeah, it's everything about this could be fun if you could just get past the fact that they're a pickpocket, right?
maybe he's a magician and he falls into being a pickpocket because he doesn't think he can succeed as a magician or something.
See, here we are,
and he's learning.
architecting a better movie from the trailer. This is a sign of a bad trailer, right? So, no, tackle.
Tackle. Third trailer.
The Deputy is now a step above the only living pickpocket in New York. And what I mean by that is, like, the universe is sort of like a violent, disgusting universe. And I say disgusting, that's very strong. It's sort of like, it's gritty, it's dark. It literally seems to take place entirely in the dark. And this is about a guy who's like a part-time deputy who's trying to be a cop and not succeeding. So, where this sort of has that same A24, like, I don't want to say malevolent universe. It's sort of like indifferent, but like dark. It is about a character who is trying to succeed. However, he is not anywhere near as likable as the pickpocket from the last trailer. So even though, like, I like this idea, and I even like the idea of somebody who's in like a tough life situation and in a tough universe, a dark universe, trying to succeed. It's just the character is he's just not it. I don't believe he's capable. And it's not helped by like everybody else seems to look down on him. But again, this sort of is in that same realm of the Dink, where the Dink's a comedy and it worked. As William said, this is another one where now we're trying to make a better movie based on this trailer. So even though this is a step above the only living pickpocket in New York, because the main character has good intention and does seems to be trying to succeed, it still has a lot of the same trappings, at least in the universe around this character and the character himself, who doesn't seem capable. Whereas the pickpocket seemed capable, this guy doesn't seem capable. Tackle.
Yeah, I just thought I see where you're building with this being a step above the last one, but for me this one was more boring than the last one. Like, at least there was some visual, seeing them pick the pockets was at least visually interesting. Like,
yes, directing wise, the last one was less boring. I agree with that.
Yeah. So sorry, this was another tackle.
Final trailer.
Violent Night 2. I really want to hear what William has to say about this. I don't think he saw Violent Night. If you remember, I really enjoyed Violent Night. The idea of taking Christmas and putting it into a action movie where Santa Claus is the action hero. And it's a John Wick style sort of action movie, I thought was tremendous. And this movie is sort of like the Die Hard 2 of the Violent Night series, except I think it's going to be better than Die Hard 2, and I think it's going to be better than Violent Night. And what I mean by that is Die Hard 2 wasn't as good as Die Hard, whereas I think Violent Night 2 is going to be better than Violent Night. And, Die Hard 2 was Die Hard, but in an airport rather than in a building, in a, tower. This is Violent Night, except instead of in somebody's house, it's in a mall, which, I mean, if you want a premise for Christmas, Violent Night 2, Santa Claus has lost he's lost the meaning of Christmas. And he goes, how am I going to find it here? And he's in a mall, which is hilarious, right? And hopefully they work on that. But then this becomes just an action comedy, a John Wick style, and it's incredibly entertaining. Seeing the fighting. And then Kristen Bell in this trailer. I'm glad somebody finally found the action hero role for Kristen Bell. Hopefully she never has to do MCU now, because this is the role for her. And my only critique of this trailer is I'm afraid it gave away the entire movie. And I'm afraid the extent of Kristen Bell's role in this trailer is her role in the movie. And I'm afraid she's not going to come out until the end of the movie, and she's sort of who saves the day. And then, of course, people are going to be complaining about, this is all about female fake female empowerment, and, this increased or continued fantasy that women can be as strong as men, which I push back and I say, Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus are supposed to be magical.
Yeah.
But this looks, I mean, it's the same thing with Marvel where like, you know, these characters are supposed to be magical and we're going to get mad that these female superheroes are competing with men, fighting with men. But anyway, this looks incredibly entertaining to me, especially because I enjoyed the first one, but this looks even better than the first one to me. So this is a massive hug for me.
Hug.
Yeah, I didn't see the first one, but you know, it's an action comedy, holiday themed movie. This is right up my alley. This is not something I will run and go see in the theaters. And maybe I have to watch the first one, so it is a
Netflix and hug.
This is way better than a Netflix and hug. You need to see the first one. And this is, I look, I'm excited to see this in theaters. I legitimately am. Like, I already looked to see if the tickets were available. And then when they weren't, I said, notify me when these tickets become available. Like,
all right.
Let me ask you this. Can you think of another movie that's coming out between now and Christmas that you would want to see more?
Well, that's true.
I can't think of anything.
There's a lot of middle of the road movies coming out, right? Nothing.
Yeah, I can't even think of a name. Name a movie.
Exactly.
I can't. I can think of this and Avengers Doomsday, and Avengers Doomsday comes out after this. So, I mean, I guess Resident Evil comes out, right? We talked about that.
Yeah.
Oh. All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. What did we learn this trip?
I learned that the next time I go to the movie theater will be for a Christmas movie. What did you learn this trip, Justin?
I mean, I don't know if I really learned anything. It's just a lot of like, to me, this was a lot of follow-up.
A lot of follow-up farce.
But, yeah, a lot of follow-up farce, a lot of continued farce, but yeah. I can't say there's anything I learned. I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I learned that sometimes $5 can fix whatever your technical issues are. I feel a lot better because the tech is so much, it's working this episode. That makes me feel good. All right. I want to thank everybody for listening. If it wasn't for you, this would just be me talking in the corner of my closet like a crazy person. It still is, but you make me feel a little less crazy. Go to if you want to support us, there's the midside.com/store, the midside.com/locals. That's how we keep the lights on. And of course, the number one way to grow the show is to tell a friend. This concludes your journey into the midside. I'm Justin Emlesneski reminding you that if things get tough, take a step back and witness the farce.
Have a stick to football day. Has anyone ever told you to stick to wrestling, Justin?
No, but they talk to me for 5 minutes and they don't know how I'm involved in wrestling, but that's a different discussion.